Rangers are ready to rip it all up this summer. Dessers heading for the exit. A £20 million England keeper in our sights. The 4-9 Urs link opening the door for a shock Gelhardt move. And Hajis' outrageous parting words still causing fury. Stay with me. This one's packed. Right, you're not going to believe this one. Ioannis Hagi, after a season at Ibrox, that you and I both know was more like a wet weekend in Saltcoats than a footballing fairytale, has come out saying he's very happy with how things went on a personal level. You heard that right. Very happy. Let's rewind for a second. The club announced last month that Hagi's contract wouldn't be renewed, ending a 5-year stint at Ibrox that's been more stop-start than a Sunday league striker with a hamstring strain. Now, there's no denying Hagi had moments where he looked the part, but let's not kid ourselves. Those moments were few and far between, especially over the past couple of seasons. You had that whole nonsense with the contract clause too. Remember that? The one where he couldn't even be considered for selection at the start of the campaign, because playing too many games would trigger some extension. It was like having a player permanently stuck on pause. Eventually, he did manage to work his way back into the team and clocked up 29 appearances in all competitions. But let's be honest, 4 goals and 5 assists over a full season, that's hardly the stuff of Ibrox legend. Derek Ferguson, proper Rangers man through and through, was left speechless when he heard Hagi talking up his final season. Ferguson was expecting frustration, anger, maybe even a bit of regret, but happiness, that's a different mindset entirely, as Derek put it. And let's face it, when a guy like Ferguson questions your mentality about Rangers, that's saying something. Now there's chat that Hagi could be off to Spain, with Romanian legend Cyprian Marica urging him towards La Liga. Honestly, maybe the slower tempo and sunshine football suits him better, because life in Glasgow didn't seem to. Wherever he goes, of course, he leaves with best wishes, but let's not rewrite history. Last season, both for him and for Rangers as a whole, was miles off the standard this club demands. Here's the question that's bound to get you going. Do you actually believe Hagi was ever fully committed to Rangers? Or was he just using the club as a stepping stone and cashing a wage while doing the bare minimum? I reckon this news alone deserves a like, don't you think? It really helps the channel grow. Now here's one that's got tongues wagging across Glasgow, and not in a way the Celtic lot will enjoy. Russell Martin could be about to make an absolute statement with his very first Rangers signing, and we're not talking about some unknown prospect from the Norwegian second tier or a last-minute bossman from League One. No, we're talking about Aaron Ramsdale. Yes, that's Aaron Ramsdale. The lad was once England's #1 contender, starred for Arsenal in the Premier League, and only last season was labelled magnificent by top journalists for some of his saves. Even Mikel Arteta called him exceptional after a man of the match showing at Anfield. That's the level we're talking about here. Of course, Ramsdale's last chapter saw him at Southampton under Russell Martin, where he was one of the few shining lights in what was a shambolic relegation season for the Saints. Now, with Southampton back in the Championship, Ramsdale's future is up in the air. West Ham are sniffing around, but the door could swing open for Rangers, especially if it's a loan deal to help cover his eye-watering £100,000 per week wages. Let's be brutally honest with ourselves for a second. Jack Butland, who arrived with plenty of hype, has had moments, but also made some glaring mistakes. Remember that disaster at Old Trafford? That performance still gives you sleepless nights. And Liam Kelly, fair play for that penalty save against Athletic Club, but is he really the long-term answer? Both have save percentages that would make your Sunday league keeper blush. Now compare that with Ramsdale's stats. More saves, better save percentage, and way more dominant coming for crosses. Even playing behind a leaky Southampton defence, he still came out with numbers that eclipse anything we've seen at Ibrox recently. Imagine having a proper England international between the sticks as Rangers march into Champions League qualifiers and beyond. That kind of signing would send a message to the dressing room, to the fans, and most importantly, to the mob over in the East End. Here's where you come in. Would you break the wage structure and go all out for Ramsdale, even if it meant causing unrest in the dressing room, just to see Celtic fans choke on their pints when they see us sign a £20 million rated England international? There's a familiar name bubbling back to the surface: Joe Gelhardt. Now, you'll remember the chat back in January. Rangers had their eye on the lad then, but he ended up taking the easy option and staying down south with Hull City. 5 goals in 20 appearances for Hull. Not exactly Holland numbers, but enough to keep scouts interested. But here's where it gets interesting. Leeds United, who are gearing up for life back in the Premier League, have just snapped up Lucas Nmecha from Manchester City on a free. That's the first domino to fall, and it pushes Gelhardt even further down the pecking order at Elland Road. With 2 years left on his contract and Leeds looking to cash in, the asking price is floating around £3 million. Given that Cyriel Dessers could soon be packing his bags for AEK Athens in a deal worth around £5 million, the maths suddenly starts to make a lot of sense. There's also the small matter of Leeds chairman Parag Maradi, now sitting on the Ibrox board, thanks to the 49ers' growing influence in both clubs. No official partnership, of course, but you'd have to be daft not to think there will be a bit of crossover when it comes to player movements. And with Russell Martin having faced Gelhardt's sides before, the new boss will know exactly what he'd be getting. An outright sale seems the most likely scenario, with Leeds maybe even fancying the idea of a buyback clause, just in case the lad finds his shooting boots north of the border. Gelhardt's only 23, capped at England under-20 level, and let's face it, if he wants to get his career back on track, becoming Rangers' new number 9 could be just the platform he needs. But let me stir the pot a bit. Would you actually back spending £3 million on a player with an unproven goal record at senior level, just because there's now a boardroom link with Leeds? Or would you rather see that money go towards a proven goal scorer who knows what it means to wear the Rangers jersey? Here we go. The Cyriel Dessers debate is reaching boiling point, and it's one that split opinion across the blue half of Glasgow like few others. On paper, the numbers make you pause for a second. 51 goals from 109 appearances into seasons, 29 goals just last term alone. Those are the sort of stats that, on the surface, make you think twice about letting a striker walk out the Ibrox doors. But then, the eyes don't lie, do they? Week in, week out. How many times did you find yourself with your head in your hands, watching Dessers fluff chance after chance? Yes, he scored goals, but how many sitters did he miss? How many big moments went begging? Gary Keown from the Scottish Mail even called it a no-brainer to sell him now. And you know what? It's hard to argue with that. At 30 years old, his value is only going one way, down. With AEK Athens circling and reportedly ready to cough up around £5 million, Rangers have a golden opportunity to cash in while they still can. And let's not forget, this summer is all about change. Russell Martin wants to stamp his authority on this squad, and part of that means making big calls on players who've been frustratingly inconsistent. There's also the small matter of Hamza Egamane. The young Moroccan could be the future of Rangers' attack, quick, technical, and with bags of potential. Surely it makes more sense to give him the platform to grow rather than sticking with a striker who, for all his efforts, just doesn't look like the man to lead a title-winning line. Of course, there's the lingering question of depth, especially with Danilo's injury history, but that's where the new sporting director, Kevin Thelwell, comes in. It's time for smart, aggressive recruitment. So here's the real heart of it. Would you take the money for Dessers? Now, even knowing there's no guarantee we've got a reliable number 9 lined up to replace him yet? Or do you risk another season of missed sitters and groans from the stands just to hang on to a player who flatters to deceive? If you haven't seen yesterday's video yet, you're missing out. Explosive news about Rangers that'll leave every fan stunned. Go check it out now.